Let's continue with the meeting. The next one, Mr. Wu Chi-wai. Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I would like to ask for written information. In paragraph 8, 10, and 16 of your statement, you said that the THB would be paying attention to issues with emergency, of an emergency nature, and also you would be asking for information from the Director of Highways proactively. And in paragraphs 8, 10, and 16, or rather 8, 12, 16, can you provide us with written information, including the date, the content, and follow-up action and conclusion? Mr. Yao. This is a very specific request. Let me put it this way. I suggest that perhaps the member can write to us via the Secretariat and ask for the Bureau exactly what you want. I know that the member has made a similar request earlier, and we have responded by and try to see what kind of information is appropriate for us to disclose and what kind is inappropriate and so on. So I will send in a written request, and then perhaps, and we will try to see how we should respond. Can you put that down in writing, and then I would hand it over to the administration for them to respond. I have a similar question. Mr. Yao has answered the chairman's question, and he said that at various occasions you have raised queries on the MTRCL's report and also the works progress. So, Under Secretary, have you given any instructions to the Director of Highways and ask him for further information on your queries? So, give me a brief answer, please, Mr. Yao. The second question from the member, he's asking whether I have made instructions to the Director of Highways personally. On your concerns or queries on the project, have you asked the Director of Highways or the Highways Department for further information? Chairman, in our discussions and meetings, I have raised my concerns. With regard to whether I have asked the Director of Information to do certain things or furnish further information, the Secretary will be doing that, actually. The instructions will come from the Secretary. Well, in other words, the Under Secretary, you have not made any instructions and asked for the Director of Highways to provide you with information on their judgment or assessment on your queries. I would not say for sure or absolutely I have not made those kinds of oral requests. But generally speaking, in our discussions, it was the Secretary or the Permanent Secretary who raised such demands. I think we share more or less the same views. Now, if the Secretary or the Permanent Secretary was not there and you were there, what about that? Well, it's not common that this will happen. Perhaps I would liaise with the Secretary on asking for the information, asking them to list the information. In paragraph 4 of the annex, you attended a meeting on the 22nd of August 2013 of the MTRCL Board of Directors meeting. And on the 20th of August in the same year, and actually 2 days before the Board of Directors meeting, the MTRCL has already made a proposal to the Highways Department, the proposal of partial opening. Now, Mr. Yao, you represented the THB on that meeting. Were you aware of this proposal before the meeting? If you were aware, how come that you have you followed up on that idea at the meeting? And if not, when did you learn about this?
That there was this partial opening option proposed by the MTRCL. USTH, Mr. Wu asked about the board meeting in 2013. At that time, I did not know that there was the partial opening option. Afterwards, I knew from documents that actually the MTRCL had discussed this issue with the Bureau or the Highways Department, but I personally did not know about it. You mean at the time of the board meeting, this was not discussed? It was not discussed on that day. Chairman, can I ask, USTH, when did you know about that? And whether you asked the Secretary to follow up the issue, because this represents a big change vis-à-vis the works contract. As I said in the paper, Chairman, it was only on the 21st of November 2013, that is 1 day before the RSC, that at the discussion with the MTRCL, then I knew about this option. And from my colleagues, I got to know that it was actually an option that was not yet accepted by our colleagues. I'd like to know the discussion of such options. Are they issues of major concern? Mr. Yao? Chairman, now of course, if the MTRCL thought that they could only adopt this option as commissioning, then I would think it is an important option. And if we think that it could work, then we would of course have to announce it. But on the 21st of November, the focus of discussion was that even though MTRCL had proposed a partial opening approach so as to commission WKT, our concern was actually whether the cross-boundary tunnel could be drilled through, whether tracks could be laid, and whether there could be trial runs and for it to be commissioned. So even if there could be partial opening at WKT, we asked whether it would mean that the entire project was progressing according to schedule. That was actually the focus of our discussion on the 21st of November. Can I follow up? The Director of Highways did not inform the Bureau of this very important option of partial opening. Do you think he was negligent of duty? USTH, from documents that were available afterwards, we knew that there was discussion between the Bureau and the Highways Department. In other words, this MTRCL option was discussed. I like to emphasize that it's only me, myself, who did not know about it. So there was some technical discussion, whether the option was feasible and what the risks were. And we knew the discussion was going on. So the Highways Department had not agreed to adopting that option. Let me follow up. So is it that the Highways Department had no responsibility to inform the Bureau of such major issues? Chairman, as I explained, why don't you supplement by saying at what level would the Bureau be able to get hold of the information, and through what mechanism should this be reported to the USTH or the STH? Chairman, maybe let me continue with my explanation. I knew that the Director of Highways had some communication with the PS. It was that before the 21st of November, I myself did not know about it. Chairman, can I follow up? Thank you, Chairman. In your reply, USTH, you emphasized time and again that you expected the completion date to be the end of 2015. That's the timetable. And according to the entrustment agreement, in fact, the works should be completed on the 4th of August, 2015. In fact, that would include taking over the project and commissioning it. So when you say you expected the completion date to be the end of 2015, does it mean that the administration had already accepted there would be a few months of delay so that the effect of the entrustment agreement would be affected, and so that you could seek compensation for losses because of the delay? US, actually, the Secretary and myself were concerned that back in 2009 to 2010, when we applied for funding from the Council, we told the Council and the public that the completion date would be 2015. At that time, we gave no specific date. But when the government entrusted the works to the MTRCL, we had to put down a specific date. In the entrustment agreement in EA2, we put down a specific date of August 2015. That was to be the completion date. In other words, the project should be ready for operation. You are talking about commissioning in August. Well, it should be ready for operation. That's the word. Well, ready for operation, and between that and commissioning, there could be some discussion. But let me emphasize, if the works cannot be completed by 2015, I would think that we would have the responsibility to be accountable to the public and the Council. It is because we told the Council and the public that was to be the completion date, and if there is any delay, we should be accountable. But specifically, is it that in August 2015, completion should be done according to the entrustment agreement? Well, that is about the management of the contract, because the agreement allows for an extension by consent of the parties. So whether there would be a need for extension, I would allow the technical departments to take care of that. But at the level of the Bureau, our concern would be whether we could complete the works by 2015 according to what we told the public and the Council. Chairman, could I please continue? You mentioned the entrustment agreement, and if both parties agree, there could be an extension. There is an extension clause, if my understanding is correct. But when the government said in public that you would go by the completion date of end 2015, does it imply that actually, with consent of the parties, the agreement would be extended at least to the end of 2015? Is that the case? And did you seek the advice of the DOJ about this, and whether that kind of public statement would impact on the clauses of the agreement? Or was it up to the Bureau to make your own judgment to say in public that at least the government had agreed that it would be completed by end 2015? So when you agree that the completion date should be end 2015, that the project should be ready for operation, did you first seek the advice of the DOJ before you said that? Chairman, as of today, we have not agreed to revising the completion date in the entrustment agreement, because we know if there is to be any revision, there would be legal liability involved. We have sought the government's legal advice. This is one thing. But I was emphasizing another thing, and that is if we knew that the project would not be completed on time, we should have the responsibility to give an account to the public. That is a separate matter. Chairman, if you would allow me, I would follow up on one more point. From the U.S. Replies, you emphasized time and again the date of end 2015. But from the papers, I could not see how the Bureau or you yourself considered the recovery measures and how that would impact on project cost. I'd like to ask you whether you raised the query at any point in time that during delay recovery that could lead to a cost overrun. And the assessment of cost overrun, would it be a major part for your consideration? And also, at which meeting did you follow up that point? Mr. Yao, when the Director of Highways reported to the Bureau, he mentioned the project time and whether there was cost overrun. That was a regular issue that was visited, and so we know the relationship between the two. An example would be in 2013 when there was a media report saying that there could be delays. As I said, the report mainly was about the West Kowloon terminus. According to the Highways Department, the MTRCL still worked to the completion date of end 2015. The funds were enough to take care of extra expenditure incurred by delay recovery measures. We were told that they had enough contingency fund. Therefore, I like to say that yes, there was this kind of discussion, and in fact we knew the two were related. In other words, the Bureau did not make an assessment on the funds needed for the delay recovery measures. Chairman, maybe I minced my words, and therefore there is this misunderstanding. Please explain again. Yes, I was trying to explain that when we were discussing project progress and when we knew that there were some delays, so that delay recovery or mitigation measures would have to be taken, we knew that would involve the plowing in of extra resources. The Highways Department would require the MTRCL to supply additional information. So the Director of Highways was in the picture. Let me cite the example again. In May 2013, in the report of the Highways Department, we were told that the MTRCL had enough resources. That was the situation. Were you talking about the contingency fund? Well, the contingency fund would be one source of funding. Whether there were other resources, maybe it should be for the Highways Department or the MTRCL to answer. But we understand that the contingency fund would be a source of funding. Next, Dr. Loy Kwok. Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, on the agreement for construction and test runs for the MTRCL, it was signed on the 26th of January 2010. In the IEP report, it commented on the initial period of the agreement. I think some members had made more or less the same comments, and that is that when the entrustment agreement was formulated, with regard to the responsibilities, duties, and roles of the MTRCL and the government, and also in the arrangement of the framework, there were no particular criteria for assessing the performance of either. And it seems we have this feeling that there was no clear delineation of the roles of either party. Say, for example, who would decide at what time that the public should be told about possible delays and possible cost overruns. And also with regard to the setting of the target date, the IEP mentioned that at the beginning of the construction, if there was some risk assessment done, then it would have known that there would be a very low chance of completing the project in August 2015.
So this raises queries. The agreement, when it was first drawn up, there were details set out, and a critical point is the targeted commissioning date. So what is the role of the government? The government should be taking a steering role because this is a major works project and it's related to people's livelihood. The Undersecretary, among all the government officials, should be the one following up on the project for the longest period because you served in the last term and you also serve in the current term of administration. So with hindsight, how come that in drawing up the agreement, it gave people the impression that the government was put in a passive role? Mr. Yao. There are two parts to Mr. Lo's questions. He seems to be saying that the government has a control or has a say on the commissioning date of the project. But on the other hand, in terms of monitoring the works, we are playing a passive role. Well, two parts. In pinning down the commissioning date, you might be subjective and saying that we should be taking forward the work as expeditiously as possible, but at the same time you relied on the MTRCL to tell you the commissioning date. And as what the IEP said, that you haven't done a proper job in your risk assessment. So what was the participation of the government in such matters? Dr. Lo's question may be related to my service in the last term of government. In the last term, in drawing up the project parameters, I participated very little. In fact, it was the Bureau's dedicated colleagues who were mapping out the program schedule with the MTRCL. And the MTRCL has also engaged a consultant to come up with a program schedule. And what was the basis for doing that? I didn't participate in the discussion, but to my understanding, there were strong views in the community, and that is Hong Kong and the mainland should be better linked. And on the mainland at that time, there were many express railway projects being constructed. Our section will be connected to the Shenzhen section, and the Shenzhen section will be commissioned earlier than the Hong Kong section. So at that time, the community was of the view that the administration and the MTRCL should try to narrow down the discrepancy in the commissioning time of the Shenzhen and Hong Kong sections of the railway. So this was the community aspiration. But when MTRCL made its works proposal, from information available to me later on, I learned that they have done various assessments. And, well, the time schedule is probably going to be very tight, but it seems that it is unachievable. So that's what we agreed on then. From the IEP report, it is said that there is no evidence to say that the administration is putting pressure on the MTRCL on the work schedule. So that's stated in the IEP report. So the government and the MTRCL are well aware of the community aspirations, and we should want to do the work as fast as we could. Well, Chairman, it gave one the impression then that for various reasons in the initial stage of the project, delays were already experienced. And also we have to dovetail with the work schedule of the mainland. Well, are we having too ambitious a commissioning target date? Now, for the IBC report, it also says that there is a lack of buffer period for the project. Let me turn to another subject. The Undersecretary said that in the last term of government, he didn't participate too much in the project. But for the current term of government, especially of what happened in 2013, I had a follow-up question. The last time the Director of Highways came to discuss the work of the PSC, he mentioned that the Bureau's representatives attended the PSC meetings. Well, it's not the case that they attended every meeting, but anyway, after the PSC meeting, the Director communicated with the Bureau. And on the 29th of August, the 2013, the 38th of PSC meeting was held. The works should be completed by 68%, and the actual percentage was 43.2%. And on the 39th meeting, the MTRC reported that the completion rate was 40.4%, and the target was 71.5%. Well, not just for these two meetings. I recall that at the relevant council meetings, there was a schedule that was lagging behind. It seems the situation was going from bad to worse. MTRCL told us that there were DRM measures to be in place, but then if this is the situation, we query whether the commissioning date could be achievable. Undersecretary, I want to discuss your participation. What have you done in terms of your communication with the Highways Department and so on? Well, in your memory, in November 2013, you discovered that there might be a problem with the commissioning date. And actually, for a period before that date, you will find that there was a great gap between the targeting completion percentage and the actual completion percentage. So do you think, have you made the suggestion that there should be an assessment by the department on the situation? We understand that this is an arduous project and it is quite contentious. And on the project completion time and the budget, we've been all along very concerned about those. And we have been watching closely the work's progress. And in the initial stage, we were very much concerned about the cross-boundary sections because that involves not only the Hong Kong side but also mainland contractors and other parties. So we were very concerned about this. In May 2013, there was a media report, and their focus was rather on the WKT project. So because of this, we were also paying more attention on that section. I participated in that meeting for reporting the progress to the Highways Director of Highways, and I knew very well that the Director of Highways was asked by the Secretary to communicate with the MTRCL. There was a number of contracts, and we were paying close attention to the several individual contracts, especially the one involving the cross-boundary sections. And also there was this other section which is later flooded, and also for the contracts related to the WKT project, we were paying particular attention to those contracts. And for a number of times, the Secretary has asked the Director of Highways to discuss with the MTRCL to see what the RMs would be put in place to recover the slippage. This is what we have done in a number of meetings. Chairman, I also noticed, and actually several members have pointed out this, about the partial opening option. Well, if the Bureau or the department heard about the partial opening option, well, that was a very strong signal that there were delays with the project. So I found it bewildering that there was this strong signal that there was a high risk of the delay of the project. How come that the Bureau was not putting more efforts or calling for an emergency communication channel to be established so that you could have some common grounds, draw up some common grounds, and then make necessary arrangements afterwards? For example, when the delays would be announced, that would be a better approach. Undersecretary, you've been participating in this project all along. With hindsight, would you say that there was negligence on the part of the Bureau? Chairman, I agree to one point. If personally I was made aware of the partial opening option earlier, then I would got to know that there might be serious problems. Well, actually, when I learned about this piece of information, I got the same impression too. The MTRCL could not commission the project by end 2015 because they were proposing this partial opening option, and they should come with a full report on what's happening. Apart from this, there was another issue on the tunneling works. And based on the judgment at that time, well, that was also a very critical part of the project. Well, not just the tunneling works, the cross-boundary tunneling works. Well, our focus at that time was on the cross-boundary tunneling works. Now, at that time, the administration hadn't accepted the partial opening option. And well, if the problem related to the tunnels could not be resolved, then the project could not be commissioned on schedule. And if that was the case, we had to report the situation to everyone. At that time, the MTRCL said that they were confident that for the Hong Kong section of the cross-boundary tunnels, they would be able to tell us whether the slippage could be recovered. And, well, in order to give us the information, they needed time to make the assessment. So that's why we allowed for some time for them to do it. I have a question myself. Mr. Yao, do you know that in 2013, the MNV consultant had prepared a report, and the delay situation that they said was very different from the MTRCL's assessment. Do you know about this?
Let me put it this way. No, I'm asking about you, Mr. Yao, not the Director of Highways. Well, my memory tells me that from the Highways Department, I knew that they knew that there were delays. Well, that we are all clear about. I'm asking about the MNV consultant report on delays, and the assessment in it is quite different from the MTRCL report, and it seems the gap is becoming wider. Were you aware of it? I did not come to grips with the detailed discrepancies between the MNV consultant report and the MTR report. I can only say that. Mr. Tony Chair, Deputy Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Yao, on this XRL project, now, of course, there is a monitoring mechanism within government to monitor the progress of the works and also the cost expended. The MTRCL would also report the situation of the project to the Director of Highways, and the Director of Highways would, on a regular basis, report to the Bureau, the Secretary, and Mr. Yao yourself. From your oral statement this morning, para 10, you said that you yourself first learned from the MTRCL in the latter half of November 2013 that the project would not be completed by end 2015. You said that the information was from the MTRCL and you would put emphasis on it. You said relative to information from the Director of Highways. My question here is, in November 2013, I think you would also note that actually on the 20th of August 2013, the MTRCL proposed that there could be partial opening at the end of 2015. At the board meeting on the 20th of August of the same year, you did not know about this, but you yourself knew about this only 3 months later. My question for you is, in November, you knew there was to be delay, and so you personally, did you make any proposals or issue any instructions to the Director of Highways, the MTRCL, or the MNV consultant? Chairman, as I said, it was on the 21st of November 2013 that at a meeting I knew about the situation from the MTRCL. At that time, the discussion was whether that option would provide a solution to the problem. At that time, the MTRCL proposed the partial opening option, and at that time, as far as I know, our colleagues did not agree to or immediately accept the option. And we also pointed out that, of course, the WKT was an important segment, but then there is another crucial segment, and that is the cross-boundary tunnel. Therefore, during the discussion, we said that if as a whole we could not complete the works by 2015, we would have to make a report to the LegCo. This is what I said just now. No, Chairman, my question for Mr. Yao is, first of all, you knew about this only 3 months later. You yourself would find it acceptable. But you are the USTH. You had the responsibility of monitoring progress. And I think some things were important. When you talk about an partial opening, it means it would not be commissioned in full. And you knew it only 3 months later. So do you think that that was in order? And also at the end of November, there was information from the MTRCL that maybe they could not complete the project on time. Is it that you found that acceptable? The Director of Highways did not tell you about it because you said the information was from the MTRCL. The Highways Department did not tell you that the works would be completed by end 2015. And you did not think that anything was improper, Mr. Yao? Chairman, in August, I attended the board meeting. I did not know about that option then. As I said, it was from colleagues and documents that I knew that that was already discussed with department colleagues. And they explained why that was a kind of contingency solution. No, Chairman, I'm asking about the delay of the information, why he did not find it to be improper and why he did not follow up. Well, actually, it was like this. When I knew that it was me, when on a working level, I did not get the information in the first instance. But then my colleagues and maybe the secretary himself might have noted the situation, and so I thought somebody in the bureau was already handling the situation. And when I knew about it, I knew there was some the need for some contingency. But you did not even know about it. So how come you knew people in the bureau already knew it? No, I got to know afterwards that actually colleagues were discussing it and were handling the matter already, and that was quite reassuring for me. Because it was not that in the bureau nobody knew about it. And on the 21st of November, I got to know about it, but then it was not that the bureau also only got to know about it only then. I did not find that very comforting, but when I found out afterwards that it was only me who was not in the picture, but my colleagues were already discussing the matter. So colleagues were already handling or processing the matter. So at least the bureau was in the know. So it's your view that it is not ideal for you to know about this only 3 months later. Well, this is for me. This is for me. No, not for you, but you are an accountability official in the bureau. Do you think that was an ideal situation? Chairman, I should put it this way. If our colleagues were already discussing the issue, I can put it this way. If they are already discussing the issue, I think it is right for us to allow technical colleagues to come to a view after discussion before we can make a judgment. By the 21st of November, I attended a preparatory meeting, and it was only on that day that I came to know about it. And to me, my view was that I did not find it comfortable. But then there were already people handling the matter within the bureau. Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Yao, according to para 12 of your statement, you pointed out that as the bureau had to rely on the HYD for technical advice regarding the implementation of the XRL project. I believe in April 2014, the MTRCL and the government announced that the XRL project would not be completed on time and be commissioned. Well, I believe before that, the Highways Department would, from time to time, provide and supply technical advice, including project delays and DRM or options. Is that right? Chairman, very often the Highways Department would report progress and would tell us where there would be a discrepancy between progress and scheduled program. Normally speaking, if there was any delay, the Director of Highways would say that they had required the MTRCL to find ways to recover the progress or to take mitigation measures. And sometimes the Highways Department would tell us that they had issued instructions to the MTRCL, but whether more plant would be added, more manpower would be added, or they would change the methods of work, or to add work fronts, or to buy more tunnel boring machines, etc. Well, okay, I understand. So the answer is yes. I'd like to follow up with other questions. And the DRMs would be submitted by the MTRCL, and the Highways Department would comment on them to say whether they agree or support them. Mr. Yao, according to your statement, para 19 and para 20, I think you have covered those. That is the DRMs taken or the effect of the DRMs. I think the Highways Department did not raise objection. Chairman, can I follow up on para 6 of the statement? It is said that if there is a need, the director would report to the secretary the major issues about the progress or significant issue. I think I have asked these questions before, but what do you mean by significant issues or significant topics? And also, Mr. Yao, in your oral statement, you also said in para 9, you mentioned significant parts of the works project. You actually used the word segment. Mr. Lau, Director of Highways, also mentioned significant issue, significant parts, etc. And he said those terms would mean the same thing. Now I'd like to ask you about the terminology. I'd like to ask Mr. Yao, what is your understanding of the terminology? Do you think these terms mean the same thing? Do they mean the same thing, Mr. Yao? The Director of Highways makes professional judgment and decides what should be reported to the Bureau. He can always do so based on his experience and judgment. We would listen to such reports from the Highways Department, and as I said, we would also avail ourselves to media reports which might quote information from contractors showing that there could be delays. And this would not be about any part of the contract, but the overall completion date. No, Chairman, I was actually asking about significant issues, significant topics, etc. that would be reported by the Director of Highways to the Bureau. I'm not talking about reading newspapers, because you said that the Highways Department would be the department providing technical advice to the Bureau. And I'd like to comment on the word significant. In April 2014, or between 2010 to April 2014, did the Highways Department report to the Bureau any significant issue or any significant work segments? If yes, on how many occasions?
Your question is very specific. the figures? Well, I don't have the information on hand with me now. I will be providing you with a written reply later. I have to go back and check whether there is any documentation on that. Chairman, I would like to further follow up. In paragraph 6 of the statement, it says that the THB has been carrying out general monitoring of the works progress of the project. What do you mean by general monitoring? Is it what you said, Mr. Yao, this morning in paragraph 9 of your speaking notes, that you will be taking a macro perspective on the project, and you would just be looking at the significant work segment and whether the delay of individual contracts will affect the overall progress of the project. Is this what you meant by general monitoring? In the Chinese rendition of the word, I wonder whether the Chinese translation is good. In the English version, I used the word general monitoring. Well, it may not be easily comprehensible when you read it for the first time, but in my speaking notes, I also said that there are different emphases between the Bureau and the Highways Department. What we are concerned about is the entire project, the budget, and so on. And there may be areas which cannot be handled by the MTRCL alone, and we might have to step in. And there may be public interest involved in the works. So on these issues, the Bureau will attend to, and we will take a macro perspective, and we will not be looking at the progress of individual contracts and whether there will be additional facilities or facilities which have been taken out and so on. We would be ensuring that the quality of the project is up to standard and so on. So this is what I meant by taking a macro perspective. General monitoring in English and or 概括性監察 in Chinese. Well, that's what we meant. So I would like to follow up, Chairman. Mr. Yao said that the THB is just generally monitoring the works. But then we have the PSC, chaired by the Director of Highways. For the THB and the Highways Department, what are their roles in monitoring the project? For the monitoring mechanism, is it championed by the THB or the Director of Highways? Chairman, under our present arrangement, as I mentioned, the Bureau and the Department have a division of work, and they have different emphasis. And the Bureau relies on the Department in monitoring the specific works, including the progress of works, and also ensuring that the works are completed properly and delays should be recovered. And the Department will provide advice to the Bureau for our reference on a macro level. The Bureau had to have such information to see whether we should report the same to the LegCo, or maybe there are areas on which assistance from other government departments is needed. So that's how we divide up our work. Mr. Yao, it's not just a matter of division of work. Well, it's ultimately the THB should be held responsible because it is they which applied for funding from the LegCo, and it should be accountable to the Legislative Council. And it shouldn't be the case that the Bureau will not be looking at the details, and that it should be looking at things from a macro perspective. Should there be such a division of work? Well, it seems to me from what you said that you will not be looking at the details and you will not be looking at the technical side. Is it the case? Well, perhaps I have not made myself clear. Well, it's not that these are not our responsibilities. It's just that there might be details to the project, and if such details will cause an impact to the entire project in terms of the commissioning time and the budget, then for such cases we would be asking the Highways Department to report to the Bureau in a timely manner. The Bureau should be accountable to the Legislative Council and also the members of the public at large, and politically appointed officials should be held accountable. So the ultimate parties to be responsible should be the Secretary or myself, the Undersecretary. But for the day-to-day monitoring of the projects, say in verification of the data information and so on, the Highways Department does have experts and professionals who are taking care of those works. And also the MNV consultant will be providing information to the Highways Department as well. Mr. Michael Tian. Chairman, I'm a fair-minded person. I treat everyone alike. I posed some questions to the Director of Highways last time. I wanted to pose the same questions to this Undersecretary. If I bore you, please forgive me. Undersecretary, Mr. Tony Chair. Said that you will be monitoring the significant issues. So that would be the case because he read out from your statement on this. You know that there are three parts to the WKT. There is the southern end, and then there is also the northern part, and also the middle part. And you should know that for a railway project, it cannot be commissioned without a station to be built. So the station should be a critical part. In all Legislative Council documents up to the 22nd of November 2013, it was stated with regard to the WKT, there was only the mentioning of the southern part and the blue box part, and the rocks there were little, and the most problematic area is the northern part, the yellow box, because we've got 100,000 cubic meters of granite, much more than these two other parts. I have to be fair to you. I asked the Director the question last time when you approved the contracts before November 2013 in the yellow box here. Was he aware that there were 100,000 cubic meters of granite? His response was that in the northern part of the WKT, we were aware of the volume of rocks. MTRCL was aware of that, and all of us knew about the volume of rocks in that part. That was his answer. And for the electrical paper, up to the 22nd of November, at that meeting of the RSC, what he said was that on the southern part, we have dug up to the B4 level, but for the northern part, it was we have dug up to the B4, and then we're trying to build the structure from bottom up. And he only mentioned about the southern part and the blue box, and he didn't mention anything about the northern part, the yellow box. And you knew very well there were some 100,000 cubic meters of granite. And in the evening of the 21st of November, you held this very important meeting with the MTRCL. Now, why did I mention all the time about this meeting? If you have an investigation, if you want to find out something about forest, you are riding on a helicopter, then you won't be able to get to the true picture of the forest. What you needed to do is to actually go down to the forest and touch the trees there. So this is the way of doing things by myself all along. Now, at this critical juncture, well, you knew all along that there was a problem. You wanted to give a true report of what's happening on the 22nd of November, and you were not confident of the commissioning date. But Jay Warder tried to convince your boss to sell his side of the story. And you were entrusted by your boss with this very important task. And you tried to find out what's happening and whether you should give them the benefits of the doubt. And he relied on you to take the call from Jay Warder, to actually, after the call from Jay Warder, to find out the truth and whether to accept Jay Warder's explanation. And then the next day you came and sold Jay Warder's story to us. Now, when we looked at what had happened at the meeting, the DHB asked the MTRCL why the commissioning date could still be at 2015, and then they said that you could have the one single track operation scenario. Well, if the rocks could not be removed, then the stations could not be put into operation. So whether it's a single track operation or double track operation, you couldn't commission the project. So my question for the Undersecretary is this. At the meeting that evening, this issue was not mentioned. This is a very important issue. And with hindsight, have you not done a proper job? Because your gut feeling is that there was a problem. But then Jay Warder tried to convince you, or the secretary, and the secretary relied on your advice. Have you been doing injustice to the secretary? Because at the meeting you didn't raise this point at all. So what do you make of it, Chairman? In the discussion that evening, we discussed the two major points. One was the WKT project situation. We didn't go into a detailed discussion on what Mr. Michael Tian mentioned, the volume of the granite there, whether we would be able to work things out and so on. Sorry, the director admitted that when the contract was awarded, he was well aware that in this yellow box there was 100,000 cubic meters of granite. And if you knew about this, do you think this is a trivial issue? We didn't go into the details of that point. We have to make an integrated assessment, and that is for the WKT project, whether it could be, all the works could be completed in 2015. If you could not remove the rocks, there could be no station to talk of. You have to have a terminus before the railway project could be commissioned. And in order to do that, you have to remove the rocks beneath the terminus. That could never be a minor issue, but you never mentioned that evening. All right, apart from what's stated in the paper, what is said in that meeting, well, try to recall as best as you can. Did MTRCL ever mention about the excavation in this yellow part? He didn't, well, nothing had been done yet. So this is a big question mark. Did they mention anything about the yellow box? If my memory serves me right, I couldn't recall whether anything was said about this yellow box. Did you discuss anything about granite? Bottom-up approach. There were tens of thousands of cubic meters of granite. Did that get ever discussed in that evening?
On that evening, we were talking about November 2013, and from that till 2015, there would be another 2 years. We were talking about the progress of grouting. At that time, we were talking more about the efficiency or progress of grouting. Okay, if the MTRCL did not even mention it, with hindsight, do you think it was a deliberate cover-up? Well, it's like this. If I should make any judgment here personally, that's one matter. But as I was answering another member's question, we were asked how we assessed the performance of the MTRCL. I can quote from the IEP report in para 3.24. It said that the MTRCL, with regard to reporting to higher levels or the government, the transparency was lacking. Okay, I understand. My last question is, the fact that on that evening you knew there was so much granite there, and the Director of Highways admitted that he knew about it when the contract was awarded. But then on that evening, the Bureau or the department did not ask any questions about that. Now, with hindsight, do you think that the monitoring was not done in a satisfactory manner? Chairman, if we look back now, the Bureau and the department are related to MTRCL, which was responsible for taking forward the project, and how we relate in the concession approach. I think we should really take a hard look at the situation. As we said, this is the first project that is taking the concession approach, and now this is the result we have to face. If the MTRCL does not report everything to us and does not report the overall situation, well, look, if you already knew something when the contract was awarded, you should not blame the MTRCL for not mentioning it that evening. If the award of the contract was done in the knowledge of the Director of Highways, now this would be a crucial thing, and you might be unfair or being unfair to your boss. Don't you think you have not done enough monitoring? Chairman, please answer in a brief way. Please answer briefly. What is your view? Chairman, in the IEP report, there are many observations, and believe many of them are of reference value. And this will benefit us in future railway projects. These would be very important reference indicators. Thank you. Mr. Chen Kam Lam. Chairman, I'd like to seek more understanding about the monitoring system. At the beginning of 2013, we knew that there might be some delay. It is just that we did not know the extent of the delay. During that time, the MTRCL had communicated with the Highways Department and had proposed short, medium, and long-term measures to make up the delays. Just now, the U.S. said there was not enough transparency and that they did not have full grasp of the information. From the perspective of high-ranking officials in the government, did you know the main cause of the delay? How did you come to know about the actual situation? Through what channels? And through the obtaining of what information? Chairman, the main source of information for me was to attend the regular meetings chaired by the Bureau to take reports from the Director of Highways and also regular internal meetings of the Bureau. Relevant colleagues would be making reports to us. Chairman, so the U.S. would receive documentary information from his subordinates to understand the actual situation. But from the documents, could you know the extent of the delay? Because from the sequence you gave us in the papers in 2013 from May to November, you got to know gradually that there was a problem, but it seems you did not know about the severity of the matter. Even the Highways Department did not know whether to believe in the information filed by the MTRCL, and yet the Director of Highways still trusted that completion could be done in October 2015, and then there could be testing and trial runs, and the project would be ready for operation by the end of 2015. I'd like to know, in that period, how much did you know? Is it that you trusted the mechanism and so you thought there was no problem? What I want to find out is, in the entire monitoring mechanism, apart from the Highways Department, we also have the M&V consultant. Did they discharge their duties diligently to provide information? Is there a problem in the entire mechanism? Is there a need for a review? Please answer the question. Mr. Yao. Chairman, at the Bureau, the Secretary and myself do have to rely on information supplied by technical departments. I believe the Director and the subject team have discharged their duties diligently to report situations to the Bureau. It is not that everything was done in writing. Sometimes they reported orally the issues of concern, and that action would have to be taken. The Director would often report that he had already required the MTRCL to propose specific measures to recover delay, including the tunneling works I mentioned and also the WKT. These were reported, especially regarding the WKT, which occupies a big area and involves different contracts. The interfacing of contracts was quite complicated. Very often, the MTRCL would say it needed time to discuss with contractors before it could come to grips with the actual situation and the timing. So when the Director of Highways explained issues to the Bureau, he would of course state the seriousness of the matters, and at the same time he would say he was already discussing matters or methods for recovering delay. Usually time would be given for the options or measures to be studied into and implemented. That happened in the process, and as members pointed out, in November, that was a crucial period. And there were more major changes to the WKT and the cross-boundary tunnel. After listening to the MTRCL saying that if we pointed out to the public that there was absolutely no chance of completion in 2015, then what could have been done would become not possible. So that was the crunch time. If, in our view, there was a delay in project time, and if there was a good cause for it, then we should report to the public. We should report to the public in clear terms, and there was no need to cover up. But if there was an opportunity to make up for the delay, and our judgment was that we should give it the opportunity to recover the delay, but then we should also allow the council and the public to have an account, and that the completion date was at risk. That was how we approached it. I think we all understand that if indeed there would be an opportunity to catch up, then we would allow or should allow the MTRCL to take up measures to do it. But then reality is, during the process of monitoring, you actually knew that there was something that could not be done. The Director of Highways, in fact, raised dissatisfaction many times with regard to measures proposed by the MTRCL, saying that they did not work. So USTH, did you know about the dissatisfaction put forward by the Highways Department? Did you know about such issues? So did you trust the MTRCL or did you trust the Highways Department? Mr. Yao. By November 2013, we relied on the advice of the department as to the possibility of catching up. And that is, should we report to the public that definitely the completion date would not be in 2015, what kind of impact there would be on the contractor? Would it be that that would mean more delay? Or is it that the contractor still had the opportunity of catching up? The department's view was that it was of the view that the MTRCL had that concern, and the director could not rule out that the catching up might not be successful. And so we came to a view on the basis of that judgment. But the department also told me that it would give the MTRCL a few months, and that is by April 2014, the MTRCL should state very clearly what the DRMs would be. If by that time the MTRCL could not come up with DRMs, then the director should arrive at some independent judgment. He could not only rely on what the MTRCL told him. I would say that was the crunch time, and that is whether by April 2014, the MTRCL could come up with a DR option that would be to the satisfaction of the director. Can I put it this way, that the director had already reflected the actual situation to you, and he also explained to you why he was dissatisfied with the proposals. And also, the director actually reflected to the Bureau that there was possible delay and that you were in the know. To me, I believe the director had stated the problem and had also stated the possibilities and the risks. Department staff and Bureau staff held a discussion and as to how we should present the situation in November and what we should do following it. Well, in the government monitoring team, there are many technical staff members. And with regard to DR measures proposed, I think they must be in the know, and that is why the director has said that he was not totally satisfied with the proposals. Now, if that's the case, why is it that at that time you still allowed the MTRCL this stance that it would not rule out the project being completed by 2015? And also in early 2014, the then CEO of the MTRCL still gave the undertaking to the Bureau that the Bureau should rest assured that they would complete the project on time. So how come you had any basis for trusting the MTRCL then?
Mr. Yao, in November 2013, well, at that meeting, the project director and the then CEO emphasized the 2 points. Now, if there may be an impact on the contractors if we made the announcement of a delay, and then they also said that there were still 2 more years to go, and if they were given more time to come up with DRMs, and also they would also be in a better position on the Hong Kong section of the cross-boundary tunnel works, then they would be in a better position to say whether there would be a delay. So we agreed to such a conclusion. Now, after 2014, do we just rely solely on the CEO's undertaking and then trust in the MTRCL works? Well, in fact, in the past, we didn't totally rely on MTRCL's views. But after 2014, we were extra careful, and we also depended on the Highways Department assessment as to whether that's achievable or not. So after November, we were more vigilant. And that's why we asked the MTRCL to give us some DRMs in April. Chairman, the director had raised some dissatisfaction. And after that, do you think the administration or the government have been doing a poor monitoring work? In the entrustment agreement, is it the case that the provisions will not allow you to do proper monitoring work? We haven't had a quorum. Well, you should have the duty, but the monitoring role exists in name only. Mr. Yao, Chairman, this is a massive and complicated project. And the monitoring work on such a project is not easy. We have to depend on whether the MTRCL will exercise its best endeavors to take forward the work. Are they professional? Are they discharging their responsibilities fully, and so on? Now, with hindsight, especially after the IEP has done its work, we found that the MTRCL has not been giving a full account to the senior management of the MTRCL or the administration on the work's progress. This is a conclusion drawn by the IEP, and personally speaking, I'm not happy with that. Mr. Tan Ka-piu, do you want to ask a second round? I can give you 5 minutes if you have a question. All right? Well, last question from myself. Mr. Yao, you and the secretary is an ex officio member of the MTRCL board, and you are an alternate member. Between yourselves, when you take part in the MTRCL works, is it you who do more of the work, or is it the secretary? It's mainly the secretary. Well, I'm talking about the actual number of meetings. Of course, he is the ex-officio member. He should be attending the meeting. But in reality, who attend more meetings? Well, it's the secretary himself. Well, he is a person who gets down to the work himself. It is his duty who would try to attend the meetings as much as he could. Thank you, Mr. Yao. If needed, the Select Committee will invite you to a hearing. I thank you for coming here to assist us in our work. You may be excused now. The next hearing of the Select Committee will be held at 9:15 a.m. on the 26th of May at Room 3. Before announcing the adjournment of the hearing, just now, Mr. Michael Tian referred to this diagram. I believe you don't have it, right? Perhaps we can furnish a copy to Mr. Yao, because he has asked you this question, and it will then become a part of the evidence. So I will be providing you with a copy of this. Sorry, the speaker is not coming through. There is a electrical paper, CB4 611 141502. It's page 4 of that paper. So I'll be providing you with a copy for your reference.